First of all, I want to introduce our guest speaker for tonight, is State Representative Stefani Carter, who is a candidate for Railroad Commissioner. Stefani is from Texas, graduated from Harvard Law School, went to work as Assistant DA in Collin County, and was elected a state rep in 2010. I will tell you one of the remarkable things about Stefani is that she doesn't maybe line up with her district quite as well philosophically. Would you say that?
I have a conservative district.
You have a conservative district? You have a conservative district.
I hope so, because they elected me.
See, okay, so because I heard you were more conservative than your district. So that's out there. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that we get to explore when people come over here. So she's going to speak for a little while about why she would possibly want to run as railroad commissioner. You could probably ask her questions about the constitutional amendments, about being in the House, anything you want to ask. This is our opportunity to get to know Stefani in this meeting. And anyway, please welcome Stefani Carter.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It is nice being with Patriots. And we do have Patriots in House District 102. Thank you, Julie, so much for the nice introduction. I really appreciate it. And because my staff helped write that introduction, thank you so much, Chris Butler, for it's so nice to be here. I tell you what, people all over the state talk about this Tea Party group. Absolutely, because you are working hard fighting the fight on behalf of liberty. And I see here on this poster you have great people, including Herman Cain, for instance, who came and spoke. So Representative Steve King as well, I see. Well, I am, as you heard from Julie, a state legislator from North Dallas, and I'm running for the Railroad Commission. And many of you may wonder, now you all are more astute probably than so many average voters. But for those who don't know, the Railroad Commission regulates oil and gas and alternative fuels. That's right. It's our oldest agency, and it's misnamed. So we're hoping to change that in future legislatures. I want to share with you a little bit about my background and tell you why I'm running for the Railroad Commission. And I'll just say first and foremost, I didn't come from a wealthy background at all. My background is one in which I was raised in a family of 8. My father started his career in a refinery processing crude oil in East Texas. And my mother, she was a school teacher. And we were talking back there a little bit about teaching and the challenges in our public education system. My father, he left his career as a chemical engineer and he started his own business. And the economy went south, as many of you will remember, in 1987. And when that happened, my daddy had to shut his doors to his business. And that is when he started doing odd jobs. And he created a lawn care business. And he's been mowing lawns ever since. It's truly a small business in which he goes out with one guy, they mow lawns and they do irrigation work, trim trees. Mom, she's the kind of office administrator. She prints out all the invoices and folds them into thirds, stuffs the envelopes, hopes that checks will arrive. And so they've worked hard for all of their kids, and believe it or not, with 6 kids, we had some tough times out there. How many of you come from big families? Okay. There are several of you, 6 or 7 of you. And how many of you have 5 siblings or more? Oh my gosh, you guys are an anomaly. Well, I'll tell you, you know that it's tough with a lot of kids. And my parents, they would say that we didn't have very much, but they were certain to show us a lot of love and support. And they were strong role models and taught us the value of public education and hard work and self-responsibility and freedom. And my parents taught very much that we should all be grateful for what we have. Whether it's little or a lot, we were grateful to be alive. We were all gifts from God. And my parents are strong pro-life Catholics. They are believers in our Constitution. and they understand that everybody in this room, just like they do, works hard. And they said that they would do anything to help their kids succeed. And so they taught us all about how we can support this flag right here in our great country, because we have a lot of great opportunities here that a lot of people don't have across this world. And so I grew up believing that we have to support our small businesses, like my daddy's business in lawn care. And I grew up seeing how some of our federal regulations really hurt our small businesses. They really strangle families just trying to make a living. I mean, people who just want to put food on the table and then crash to the tube. And that's how I was raised. Now, like many people who look like me, I was raised to be a Democrat. Now, don't throw anything at me, okay? Because that was a long time ago. I came to an understanding. I realized that although I was a Democrat, I was still conservative. I knew that I was pro-life and that I believed in fiscal responsibility and that we have to have more opportunities for our kids with regard to education. And I knew that I wanted to have strong public safety laws as a former prosecutor. And so I asked my parents one day, Mom and Dad, why are you Democrats? And I did not get a sufficient answer. They did not have any good answer for me. And I realized then that the Republican Party is a party of opportunity, that it's a party in which we have, frankly, lost our way in a lot of ways. And that's one reason why I'm here. I'll tell you that when I went off to UT, and oh, that's right, hookup. Sorry. Amen, amen. I went off to UT, and when I graduated, my parents said, what are you going to do next? And I said, well, I'm going to be a journalist. My parents said, okay, go get a job. So I tried to get a job. I couldn't get hired. So like many of my friends who are lawyers, I went to law school. And, I went off, and, a lot of times you go off and you have, foreign ideas when you go off. And that is what happened to me, because odds when I became conservative at Harvard Law School. How ironic. And I wasn't the only one. Ted Cruz also went to Harvard Law School. And so I laughed. I saw Ted in Midland a couple weeks ago, and I said, Ted, don't you think that there's probably a guy in a corner somewhere at Harvard who's just scratching his head and saying, where did I go wrong? Right? So, after I went to Harvard, I reflected on my time when I was a little old intern at the Heritage Foundation, and all the great conservative ideas and points of political philosophy I learned there. And as you all know, that's a great conservative think tank. And that's where we should probably send everyone from Washington, D.C. to go and learn a thing or two. It's right there on Capitol Hill. So I'll tell you that it's been exciting to be conservative, and conservative in the Texas House. I want to say a couple things about the legislature and then turn to energy, and then take your questions. We have a challenge in Texas, and that's called the challenge of conservatism. We have a great state, but as you all know, there's a big push by the Democrats and by the liberals, all led by President Obama and his administration, to change our state and turn Texas blue. How many of you have heard of Turn Texas Blue? Okay, everybody in this room, Chris, what am I asking for? These folks know what Turn Texas Blue is. Well, let me tell you something. We have to keep fighting the fight, because here's the problem. The problem is the Democrats want to win back Texas. They're putting in millions of dollars. They are, frankly, attacking our liberty, our government and its size, and they're attacking life. And we see that now through Wendy Filibuster Davis. And she's a significant problem. And the Democrats, they also should all walk over to the Heritage Foundation for Texas and learn a thing or two. But we have to do more to make sure that the Democrats lose the war that they're waging on the state of Texas. And in the Texas House, we had some significant challenges there. One was the budget. The state budget grew by 26% this past legislative session. Now some of you may go, what in the world is this lady talking about? But it's true. It grew by 26%. Now there are those who could take a look and get out a chalkboard, try to figure out, no, this is fuzzy math, it's not 26%, it's 12%. If you take inflation, it's actually 2.2%. But it's 26%, however you look at it. There were independent studies that concluded that. And so you saw a good number of Republicans vote no on the budget. And I'm proud to say that I'm one of the few Republicans who voted no on the state budget. And the reason is there is no need in a conservative state like Texas to grow the size of government that big. There's not a need, period. Let me tell you the other challenge that we saw in the Texas legislature, and I sit on appropriations, and I sat on energy last session, is we didn't have any conversations about water. We didn't have one, to my recollection, we did not have one conversation about water. What does that mean? That means we weren't talking about funding water out of general revenues. Now, water is very important. I have some water up here. But when it came time to vote on taking money out of the rainy day fund and to use $6 billion on various things like water and infrastructure, often without a floor, that is a minimum number of dollars being left in the rainy day fund after reducing the fund for whatever purpose, I was proud to vote no. I was criticized for having to do that. Done that. Now let me say a few things about energy. How many of you all saw President Obama's speech earlier this year on energy? And he gave so many excuses as long as his arm about why we can't be energy independent. I'm sure nobody saw that speech because nobody here would take the time to watch President Obama. Thank you very much. Well, let me tell you. I'll tell you this. President Obama has no hesitation in beating up on the conservatives. He's always talking tough talk when it comes to the conservative movement. But when it comes to energy independence, he's sheepish. He, in fact, changes his tune, and he's very quick to accept defeat. Now, we've talked about energy independence for a number of years. The only difference is we've got this innovative technology, and we have a real opportunity to take advantage of it, but we don't do so. And so the president, when it comes to energy independence, should know that we should not surrender because we can win. And particularly with fracking, with oil shale, and with really drilling and the technology, we are in this position to finally become energy independent, and particularly in North America. I think the challenge is, I could be wrong, somebody correct me, but I think that the president just hates energy. Is that possible? He may hate the country too. And I tell you what, it's a significant problem. And even Saudi Arabia's own oil minister, who was worried that buyer nations like the U.S. would stop buying Saudi oil, he's, I'm sure, entirely excited about the Obama policy because we keep on helping them, buying foreign oil from people who are threatening our lives, our dignity, and certainly our liberty. And I don't know about you, but I don't think that makes much sense, especially when we have the price of oil at more than $100 a barrel. Why would we buy so much oil from overseas? Why? Well, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I think that it's because we have a president who has a different idea. Now, he might have come from Harvard, but his ideas are far different from mine. His ideas are that we have to become energy independent without oil. And that is not possible. I'm not picking on solar, for instance, or wind. I'm just saying that Air Force One is not wind powered, is it? No, it's not. And so I think we need somebody who's going to stand up and tell the president, no more. Now, what I need you to know is that, in addition to being a strong conservative, named one of the most conservative members of the House of Representatives, now I'll tell you, in my county, in Dallas County, how many of you have heard about Dallas County? Okay, good, I'm glad, let's keep it going. No one. Dallas County is growing more Democratic by the day, I'm sad to say. And so when I say I am a conservative member, it may not mean as much down here in Montgomery County, but in Dallas County, I tell you what, I do get a little bit of heat from some of the folks in my district. I think that they probably appreciate my conservatism, but there are many who are probably more moderate than yours truly. So in addition to being named one of the most conservative members of the House, I've also been called too pro-energy. Now, I don't know what too... oh my gosh, I have a whole list of who said that to me. Brett Shipp said that to me, who's a reporter. And I have like 3 news sources of liberal media, of course, calling me too pro-energy. Now that's like being too pro-health or too pro-food. But this is something that we absolutely need. And so energy is such a critical part of modern life. And I think that it's only the president and the liberal media are both failing to understand that. And that's unfortunate. Now, I'll say that this past month, the folks in D.C. have taken on a fight on Obamacare. And of course, I'm not running for Congress, but I'll tell you that that fight is a fight that we all need to stand behind. Even somebody like me, raised much of her life without health insurance, understands what the effects of Obamacare are on each of us. Somebody told me a couple days ago that he was at a town hall. It's a Republican who has a job that took him to Sheila Jackson Lee's town hall meeting. And I said, I'm so sorry for you. And he said that these 2 African-American guys stood up in the back challenging Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee about all those fees. One was a small business owner, he said, and the other was someone, I guess, a participatory citizen. But the business guy stood up and said, you know, how am I going to pay these fees? What am I going to do now? And really challenged her about these things. We need people who are going to stand up and challenge the status quo. I mean, that's what we need. Because, I don't know about you, I am honestly so tired of the same old, same old. I really am. And it becomes very frustrating. Obamacare is one of the damaging policies of the Obama administration. And we've got to get rid of it as soon as possible. And so for that reason, I will tell you, I went out and bought green eggs and ham in honor of This is a fight, and I'm proud to be a part of the fight. And I will say, you all have done such a tremendous job as part of the fight. And I really appreciate you. I appreciate the invitation to be here tonight. And I'm happy to take questions. And of course, I'm asking for your vote in March. It's coming up. We're not going to change the date of the primary this time. I don't think. We're not. And so thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Yes, sir. Philip?
Yeah, one of the issues around here is we have a plastic injection well. As a railroad commissioner, you hear what a plastic injection well is.
I have been going around the state, talking to a lot of people about injection wells and all, a number of topics.
Okay, that's an injection well means that it can inject non-toxic materials out of anti-aging together, purple waste, acids, phosphorus, down into a formation. The problem with this well is it's in the old oil field, that's called the Humble oil field. Also, Texcom, who owns the well, lied on their application that they own mineral rights, because they're owned by a city trust company, and they never informed them that they would want to do this. So they lied about that. A railroad commission currently has reversed itself and has rescinded the letter of no harm to the oil interest, which is Denbury International, that is using CO2 to mobilize the oil in the oil field and extract it. And Denbury International says that there are not really two formations, there is only one. So that if they inject all this non-toxic material, non-toxic because it's not classified as toxic by the government, into the ground, it would go in and contaminate their oil. Also, since that oil field has been operating since the 30s, the wells there are not well documented, probably not all sealed well. In fact, I know people who work in that oil field told me that they some of the pipes were cut off and they had to fall through the section. Also, there are a number of wells that they don't even know where they're at. So we have all these soda straws that are on the same formation we don't put this material into that could migrate back up into our drinking water. And there's at least 3 aquifers that pass through that region and use as drinking water. 90% of our water down here comes from that. So I just wanted you to be aware of that particular issue because I'm sure that when the new railroad commissioners convene for the first time, that Texcom is going to be back up there to try to get that letter of no harm that's been rescinded in the state. It's currently in court and trying to finish them off so that the well will just go away and they'll have to write it off as a valid testament. But currently it's in court to stop that injection well because they do have a credential that's given to them by the Texas Environmental Quality Commission. So I want you to be aware of that. Because it is an issue, since you are concerned about water, obviously if we lose 90% of the water around here, there is going to be a community.
Well, thank you so much for sharing information on that very important issue. And I see that's zero because those comments have a number of large concerns involved. First, of course, the water issue and contamination issues. And I will tell you that that is a critical issue. We've seen the federal government come in and make allegations on contaminating water, particularly with regard and discuss widely fracking, with regard to fracking. And so the question the federal government proposed is to what extent does fracking contaminate our water supply? And ultimately, there has been, thank goodness, no evidence of that contamination through fracking. In any case, in this circumstance, we have to make sure that contamination does not happen, and there has to be a balance, obviously.
We're also talking about a number of trucks, like 90 per day, coming into the community around here, burning toxic waste from not only Texas, but anywhere else.
You know, that's also a good point. I don't know if everybody can hear or not, but he's talking about the trucks, the toxic waste that get transported by road or vehicle. And that's an issue that also...
We never had an accident.
You know, I will tell you that I certainly understand that concern. And we had quite a bit of debate with regard to the transporting of certain types of waste across Texas roads, and how do we protect, you and Eleanor in that regard, as well as the rest of us. And I will say, if you look at my notes, I think you'd be really pleased to know that I cited on what I call the safe side, publicly safe side, of making sure that we are careful and not just have a blatant ability to transport however we want, because accidents do happen. And we have to be careful about how we set policy in that regard. And so the transportation issue is very important. Another issue raised has to do with indirectly how the Railroad Commission develops either a proposal or a ruling. You mentioned it reversed itself. There are discussions now with regard to how we go about, for instance, being fair to both homeowners and companies with regard to various issues such as eminent domain. And the procedure that we use as a railroad commission, I think, must have enough sort of comment period in order to develop rules that make sense, so that there really don't need to be reversals. I'm speaking very generally, of course, but I'd be interested to hear more details about your case. The big case that people talk about is the Supreme Court decision related to the Danbury decision, which is about pipelines and common carrier. And I will tell you that we have to make sure to protect our private property rights, and we have to make sure that we understand the importance of energy production. And it's very interesting because, like many things, there must be a balance. That case is one that has caused a lot of people to work on legislation this past session. I was one of the people who worked on the common carrier legislation. Unfortunately, the bill died, and now the Railroad Commission is taking on any change through what's called a rule proposal versus through statute. And for the issue of the Danbury case, which has to do with to what extent can our large pipeline companies or small pipeline companies essentially self-declare as common carrier to allow the taking of property in certain instances. And so, unfortunately, there's not a lot of detail in that Supreme Court case, which reversed two earlier decisions. And so there have been different interpretations of how that case should be applied. And so the legislature attempted to come in and try to put more definition in there for the Supreme Court decision. And so we'll see a lot of the upcoming discussion with the Railroad Commission surround how do we protect private property rights, yet continue to produce energy. And I'm proud to say that, as I mentioned before, I worked on some of the legislation, not just on that, but on issues related to when it's an urban area like Dallas County or here in Montgomery County. What do you do about drilling your schools or in urban areas? What if you have a bad operator? What do you do? And those are issues that we dealt with as a legislature. And part of what the Railroad Commission does, we all talk about regulation of oil and gas and alternative fuels like propane and uranium and coal mining, is also help to set policy. And one of the city commissioners told me that, in her view, she spent much of her time going to the legislature and working on various issues. So I think it's very important to have a railroad commissioner who is familiar with the legislative issues, has good relationships with the legislature, and understands some of the delicacies behind some of these issues. In any case, Philip, I appreciate your making me aware of some of these issues in criminal rights and determination. And I'd be happy to follow up with you and give you my cell number if you like. By the way, I give my cell number to everyone, so Philip's not special here tonight. You may think he's special. Everybody is welcome to give my cell number. Any other questions? Yes. Julie has three. Oh.
I was just curious as to, you're a very nice lady, you're very soft-spoken, and
Thank you, I think.
I like a little bit of a pit bull. That being said, what do you see as your role as railroad commissioner? What do you see yourself doing, and what is your primary objective? What would that be as railroad commissioner?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I can't see your name tag. What is your?
Vicki.
Vicki. Vicki, that's a great question. I think that the role of the Railroad Commission has to do with the Constitution. And that primarily has to do with reduction of waste and fraud. And what in the world that means is up to interpretation, I guess. But let me tell you what it means to me. It means that we have to have efficient resources in producing energy. It's very simple. What does that mean? To me, that means that we just have to have someone who's going to have a strong conservative voice to make sure that we continue with our economic engine. That's what the Railroad Commission does. For anybody who doesn't understand it, just know, it is the economic engine of Texas. We have a lot of important agencies out there. In my view, the Railroad Commission is probably one most directly related to the strength of our economy. And so, my goal as Railroad Commissioner is to ensure that we protect private property rights, we promote energy production, we stand as a fiscally conservative voice and a conservative voice to promote that energy production, and to fight off federal regulations, because that's what the Railroad Commission does. It regulates. We're regulators. We don't like to hear that, but wouldn't you rather have Texas regulating itself than having the federal government regulate Texas?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so my goal is to continue with the work that I've already been doing. And that means fighting the fight against Obama. Now, there are a lot of candidates in this race, but there's only one who's actually walked the walk of fighting against Obama. In the last presidential election, in the general election, guess with whom I traveled to help fight the fight against President Obama? Ted Cruz. That's right, we talked about Obama, over-regulation and overburdening policies on the campaign trail. And it was really interesting doing national press conferences, national media interviews to talk about it. And so when you're called upon by the largest campaign of them all, you know that you sincerely believe in your heart that our government is out of control. Okay? And let me tell you something. You may say I'm soft-spoken, but I'm not always soft-spoken. It just depends. Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's conflict between the 10th Amendment and the Supremacy Clause, and obviously oil, gas production would fall within the state, but you're going to get into fights with the EPA, I am sure. So, as a lawyer, as a Harvard lawyer, how do you address that?
Well, I think, let me tell you, the fights with the EPA are real. Some of you may say, this is a talking point. Do we really have fights with the federal government? I'm sure all of you know that we do. Well, let me tell you, the role of the Railroad Commission is to address our 10th Amendment. Absolutely. So what we have is we have federal regulations affecting air, land, and water. And those regulations put really at risk our jobs and our private property rights. And those threats are telling. And so some examples are, what can we do as a state to regulate better relative to the federal government? We have TCEQ, right, which is our Commission on Environmental Quality, run by 3 commissioners, 1 vacated seat now. And what those guys do is they say, how can we keep, for instance, air standards ourselves? Why can't we as Texans develop our own standards? That's what they do. The federal government has come in certain instances and said, whoa, we're going to set new emission standards, the effect of which means that we're going to shut down some of our plants. What does that mean? Or here's another example. Texas has its own policy on whether to, and we signed agreements with, for instance, New Mexico, on which animals should be added to the endangered species list. And believe it or not, we put more rights in a lizard than a human. Isn't that amazing? So, let me tell you, in a certain part of Texas, we had 7 million barrels of oil in 1 year at risk over some lizards. Okay, now what's the effect of that? Well, you better believe we shut down that oil, and it was something like 1,000 wells. The cost of fuel, you better believe, would increase. Okay, so it affects those lizards that we're talking about, they affect all of our pocketbooks here. So, but the state has its own plan of action to address some of these issues without regard to the federal government. And so, between the federal government and the 10th Amendment, of course, we should all err on the 10th Amendment. Absolutely. And I'm proud that I have fought for the 10th Amendment in the Texas House. You would not believe last session how much of a fight there was with the Democrats over the 10th Amendment on something as simple as a resolution. I mean, saying that we in Texas legislature support the 10th Amendment. Last session, that did not pass the House. Can you believe that? Well, let me tell you why I didn't believe it. Because of how many Republicans we have. I believe we're driven by Republicans in Texas, not Democrats. So it's amazing. Now, there were some compromises made. And you would not believe what ended up in that resolution. I don't even want to tell you, because I'll get booed. But let me say, there is no need for compromise in cases like that, or in many cases. And that's why we have to stand our ground, period.
So we like to get to know our candidates, and it's not just the stump speech, but really what can be difference is where you are now. And so I wondered if you would talk about the toughest challenge that you've ever had in your life, in or out of politics, we want to see about some struggle, whether or not you won or lost. Why did you stick to your guns on something? Why was that tough?
Oh, that's a great question.
It's one you can, I'll give you another one, which this is easy, and you think about that and grab that. We also like to think about quickly as
Well, that was really easy. I'll start with the first question. I'll tell you that I've had a lot of challenges in life. I talked about some of them early on about really our financial challenges in my family with 6 kids and a mom who helps dad with his farm care business. I was raised, look, some of us have had really tough lives. So this is not, I'm not complaining. I'm just telling you, I'm grateful for every moment of my life. And we moved from house to house growing up. I remember living in my grandma's trailer home. We lived in a motel. And we were never homeless on the streets, but I think under the federal government's definition, we're homeless. But we can't listen to the federal government. So we had a tough life. Other challenges in the legislature that I think are critical is we have a movement, I think, among many who are liberal to release criminals, for instance. And the idea is, this is in terms of policy, release criminals in order to produce cost savings is the idea. Let them out. Just open the doors to those prisons and let them run free into our communities. And so there was a bill. Now there are thousands and thousands of bills. So it's hard to read everything. And it's hard to be on top. There's a lady, a Democrat named Alma Allen last session who had a bill which was terrible. And it had many types of felons who were going to be let loose from prison. And I'll never forget, I was a freshman, sitting there at my little desk, looking hard, and I saw Alma approach the microphone. And it's like the front of the room, and then the back over there. If somebody walks up to the back, you know that the speaker or the author of the bill will be challenged. And in fact, nobody was back there. And I'm looking at this going, oh my gosh, this bill's about to pass. And I can remember that there were a couple of Republicans on that bill. And I remember feeling so really betrayed because I knew what the actual effect of such a bill would be on my life and your lives. Whether it's covered by our liberal media, or whether anybody really takes note among thousands of bills would be a whole different thing. But I knew in my heart that that was going to happen. And so I remember standing and running to the mic. This was second reading, there were 2 readings. Running to the mic in preparation of challenging her. And I remember some of the effect of that, which was some of the, one of the Republicans on the bill really, kind of was not very happy that I challenged him on the bill. He was enjoying from legislation. And it was tough. Ultimately, after a little bit of negotiation, after not talking so nicely anymore, she pulled the bill down. And it made me realize, and it was a challenge because of the sort of backfighting of some of the Republicans. They're going to kill my bill, and the liberals. And I'm going, why are you supporting these liberal bills? You're supposed to be Republican and conservative and tough on crime. What in the world is this? And so anyway, there was a lot of sort of political backfire out of it. But ultimately, I won that battle, and that battle means that when it comes to people who are serious felons, this is not just any felons, serious felons, because I honestly believe because I was there, that bill was never going to come to fruition. And so that was one of the challenges as a freshman, trying to figure out, how do I navigate through the system and stand up against really a senior Republican leader of the House in order to defeat that piece of legislation. And there are other challenges that I've had. The other question about why I'm the best candidate in this race, as I said, that one's easy. So first of all, I am the only candidate in the race who has a proven record. Now, you all are very smart people, and that question was very smart. Well, people before a primary, have you noticed this? They all the most conservative. Yeah. They're all pro-energy, fighting Obama. I mean, it's almost like you could write the script for what to say. And here's the deal, I'm tired. I am tired of talking points. I am tired of talking points. And I'm looking at the candidates and I'm saying, I am the only candidate who, if you have a question about my voting record, you can look it up and say, my God, there's a reason she was named one of the most conservative members of the House. If you have a question about where I stand on energy issues, ask Brett Schiff, that reporter, and he'll tell you, hey, her record shows she's very damn pro-energy. I'm not ashamed of that. I wear it as a badge of honor. So, you've got somebody with a proven record, somebody who's won conservative awards. Nobody else in this race has, over the past 2 sessions, won as many conservative awards in the legislature as yours truly. Nobody else in the race has relevant energy experience relative to the Texas legislature. And as you noted in your question, that there is a tie between the Railroad Commission, at least this is how I take it, a tie between the Railroad Commission and the legislature. There has to be, because the jurisdiction of the Railroad Commission falls under Energy Resources Committee. And guess what? I served on the committee and I'm vice chair of the Energy Caucus in the House. So I hear these candidates talking about, I'm very pro-energy. I'm going, take a look at my record. I've worked on all these issues. I worked on energy litigation in the Barnett Shale. I've worked on energy legislation in the House. And I worked on the Sunset Conference Committee, which is the committee that actually addresses overhauling the Railroad Commission. All of you know that the Sunset Commission reviews various agencies over time. And the Railroad Commission is no different. And so, if there are disagreements, there's legislation that will address a bunch of issues, and staff will talk to people at the actual agency or the Railroad Commission to determine how to improve this agency. And that's what happened with the Railroad Commission in the 82nd legislative session. It came up for review. How do we fix some of the challenges? Where do we have some of the hearings? What do we do about the name? And I worked on those issues. Nobody else in this race, not one person has actually worked on those issues. And this is probably the most important issue affecting not just the Railroad Commission, but the energy industry for years to come. So I'm proud of my relevant energy experience. I'm proud of my conservatism. And I'm proud to be here tonight. And I'm happy to answer, I think, your third question.
Well, we'll probably defer that because we're going to move to our discussion with Councilman Finance.
Okay.
And I will ask you if you want to weigh in on your views. We'd love to hear it. How about you, Steph?
Well, thank you very much, and I will be here and happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.